Do you find yourself confused about traction control? You don't know if it's making you faster or if it's making you slower. Well, if that's the case, this video is just for you. I've done a deep dive into traction control and ran a number of tests. And by the end of this video, if you watch it all the way through, you're going to know if you should be using it, whether it's making you faster, whether it's making you slower, and what setting you should put your traction control on if you should ever consider it. So without further ado, let's jump in and find out what the results have taught us. Okay, the first test we're going to do is in the front wheel drive Honda Civic at Master License Test S1 with traction control 3. And as you'll see, coming into turn 1, well, coming out of turn 1 when we're accelerating, that red blip is kicking in on the traction control. So that red blip, that is cutting the power. And I noticed with traction control 3 in the medium speed corners, it was kicking in more than I wanted it to. It was holding the car's exit speed back, and it seemed to kick in more when the car was trying to understeer rather than accelerating forward. And that was something I noticed also in traction control 2, which we see here, but obviously to a lesser degree. Now each time that red blip kicks in, unless you are seriously out of control, it is costing you time. So with traction control 3 and 2, in these medium speed and faster flowing corners, it was really interfering with how fast I could come out of the corners, and it wasn't a very nice feeling at all. It didn't feel like the car was particularly out of control, and it was still kicking in. And then with traction control 1, I thought maybe it won't kick in these areas, maybe it'll still be good. And for turn 1, it was to a lesser degree again, but it wasn't required. Then coming through the mountain, the faster flowing sections, it seemed to behave better. It was better, but it wasn't perfect. It was definitely holding the car back in areas where I didn't feel like traction control was necessary. But you can see that red blip isn't kicking in as much and we are going faster. So obviously when we removed traction control, I noticed straight away that coming out of the corners, I was faster. My sector times were improved, and overall the car was just quicker, and I enjoyed driving it more. It was more predictable, and it was surprising that the traction control didn't kick in more just on the accelerating moments when the tyres were trying to spin up. It was more about shaving the speed off to stop it understeering, which really surprised me, to be honest. Okay, so that was a pretty interesting test. What I would conclude from what we've just tested there is, yes, traction control 0, even in a front wheel drive car that has a lot of wheel spin coming out of corners and is prone to understeer, is still faster. But the higher the level of traction control, the more safety you have. But it was not really on accelerating and stopping the wheels from spinning as you were, coming out of a corner. It was more as the car was understeering in the faster corners, in the higher gears, where it tended to kick in, and that's where the time loss was. But in those scenarios, there's an argument for it helping you to stay on the track more. While it's cutting the power, it is preventing the car from understeering out. And if you don't have the level of precision and control to be able to auto-correct that with throttle modulations, lifting off, being very well coordinated, then perhaps traction control can help you be more consistent. But in test 1, even in a front wheel drive road car, traction control 0 was indeed faster. But if you're struggling with your consistency and understeering out and throttle control, maybe levels 1 and 2, even 3, could be helpful. Okay, so we're looking at front-engined rear-wheel drive road car here, and I've gone with a Shelby Cobra as this really exaggerates the things you've got to consider in these types of cars. You'll see as we're coming into turn 1 with traction control 3, we get on the accelerator fairly aggressively, not massively, and traction control is kicking in, and I would say it does a pretty good job. But even in these long sweeping corners, which you wouldn't really think that are that tight, you can see traction control is really kicking in a lot. And the reason why it's kicking in a lot is because, one, we've got comfort soft tyres on, yes, but two, because the weight is over the front wheels and not the rear, it struggles to put the power down. Again, with traction control 2, it's kicking in a lot, but it's saving the car. So it's helping a lot. It's also hurting. But I need you to realize that the engine position really does affect how well a car can put the traction down. And the reason why this car is really struggling is because there's no weight over the rear tires. With traction control 1, even with a bit of throttle modulation, lifting off, coming out, it's still trying to let go. And I'm trying to control the car more with throttle modulation, because that is just what's required as we get down to traction control 1. We're going faster, but we need a higher level of precision with that throttle inputs. And as we get down to traction control 0, yes, it's faster. Yes, you can see we're closer to the ghost, but look at how much more precise I'm having to be with that throttle. It is faster, but only when you can control the car with the correct amount of throttle input. This is a very difficult car to control, and it's because it's front engined and rear wheel drive. Okay, so as you could see, with that car being a front engined rear wheel drive car with slippy tyres, the comfort tyres, it was a handful. The traction control was kicking in a lot with 3, but it was also saving it. It was also stopping it from sliding out of control. But the lower the traction control we set, the faster we were able to go, but only if we were able to control the acceleration inputs with better accuracy. So in cars like this, the advice is, if you're a new player, then probably traction control 3 is going to be faster 9 times out of 10. If you're intermediate, traction control 1 or 2. And if you're advanced and confident in your own ability, then traction control 0 would be best here. Okay, so our next test is in Master License S3 in the old school Honda Racing Hard tyres. Now this is quite a powerful car considering how light it is. It's rear wheel drive and it hasn't got a lot of downforce. Now with traction control 3, you can see it does kick in as we start to accelerate through these sections, but if you've driven this car, you know how volatile it can be. It's got a really bad habit of snap oversteering as soon as it gets into the power band. You can see as we're in that power band in 3rd gear, it really does want to wobble and spin out. Now, I found with traction control 3, it was perhaps a little bit too severe how much it was kicking in. So with traction control 2, it was still helping to keep the car under control without limiting the exit speeds quite as much. You can see coming around this long sweeping right-hander, it does a really good job actually of catching what would have been a nasty slide and maintaining some exit speed. So it's not always a bad thing. Now with traction control 1, it did still help to a degree without limiting the power too much. You'll notice through these first 2 corners we come through pretty good, but on the exit it didn't kick in as much to help save that little slide, that snap oversteer. And again, coming out of this long sweeping right-hander, we have a big moment, we have to lift off the accelerator, and you could argue that that was actually slower. So through learning that, when it came to testing it with traction control 0, I knew I had to be super precise with my throttle inputs to keep control of this car. And yes, it was faster, but we were balancing things on a knife edge here. It was more difficult and harder to get the car under control. You can see I'm gently squeezing that throttle in, being delicate with my throttle inputs, but it is definitely quicker in that scenario. Now, for the purposes of testing traction control, I made sure to use all the same gears and didn't drive them differently, but I wanted to point out how powerful some driving techniques that I teach in Sammy Snake's playlist that I have on my channel, which is all about getting faster at the game, can be one of them being using a higher gear out of corners when cars are unstable. And you'll see by using that fourth gear here, it's much more stable. We get a much better exit. So if you're struggling to get fast, I would encourage you go and watch that playlist to help out. Okay, so really interesting results there. Considering how volatile this car is, the lack of downforce, the high power to weight ratio, it's not got a huge amount of horsepower, but it is very light. And then not having the grippiest tyres, you know, racing hard tyres aren't very grippy on a car like this. It shows how difficult it is to get that car to go around corners quickly and accelerate out of corners safely at the same time, with low traction control, traction control 0 or traction control 1. So in these circumstances, unless you're an extremely gifted driver and very, very consistent and know those advanced driver techniques like taking a higher gear out of a corner and knowing when is the best time to do that, I would say traction control 2 or 3 is going to be your best bet in these circumstances. So very interesting indeed. Let's move on to the next test. Now, if I could have your attention for a very brief moment, as some of you might have seen, I've recently gone full-time on YouTube. I'm trying to make it work. So if you haven't already, give this video a like and a hype and make sure you subscribe for future content. Okay, now let's get back to it. Now, this might not be traction control, but I still think it's useful information, and there are some rally drivers out there. So when it comes to rally driving, one setting that you can change is the torque distribution. You can see this is just default set to a 30-70 split, with most of the power going to the rear tyres. Now, watch how much of a difference it makes when we set this to 50-50. And how much faster we are through turn 1. It is a powerful adjustment you can make to set some really fast rally times by having more power towards the front. It drags the car much better out of the corners. So if you're going to change anything when it comes to rally driving, because you can't change traction control, change the torque distribution. Now let's get back to traction control. So here we are at Master License S6 in the Porsche 911 GT1, a very high powered road car, mid-engined, rear wheel drive and fairly light. It's a very capable car, and as you can see coming through that final corner before the start finish straight, there's a lot of traction control kicking in, which really limits our speed over the line. And then again, when we're aggressive with the throttle inputs coming around turn 2, it's kicking in, and it's more kicking in to stop the car from understeering out. So it is slower, but it is keeping us nice and safe. But that speed over the start finish line is where we're losing a lot of time, where it's not necessarily needed. But in turn 2, you could make an argument for, you know, you can mash that accelerator, and it doesn't just go onto the grass, which is the most common mistake you can make at Atlanta in turn 1. And then we go down to traction control 1, and over the line we're actually much better. We are carrying a lot better speed, we're closer to that ghost. But as we come around turn 1 again and actually get aggressive with the throttle, we'll notice we do have a slide, and we do have to correct that, and we nearly lose control. So I take that into consideration when I'm using traction control 0 now. Over the line, we're still much faster, much closer, but my throttle inputs are more controlled. I don't just mash the accelerator, I lift off to a degree to make sure we don't get that slide. And because of that control, we are a lot faster. So in this circumstance, you could see the traction control was kicking in a lot. It was kicking in on that final turn, coming over the line with traction control 2 and 3, and that was really slowing the car down over the line. You were already at a disadvantage before you'd even got to turn 1. And then with traction control 1, it was still kicking in to a degree, and it was there as a safety net when we were just mashing the throttle coming into turn 1. It did save the car, but it was faster than traction control 2 and 3. But again, traction control 0 was the fastest as long as you are modulating that throttle input. You could see me lifting off 5 to 10% to make sure that that slide didn't happen, and that's why it was faster. It was faster because there was better controls over the impulse. But again, if you are not quite at that level, I would say in these circumstances, traction control 1 would probably be your better option. Right, so now we're getting into a super high-powered hypercar, the Aston Martin Valkyrie. Keep an eye out on what the traction control does here with traction control 3 and how our exit speed is affected. We took that corner pretty well, but with that traction control kicking in so heavily, it really did limit the potential of exit speed, but it did keep us safe. Now watch coming out of turn 2. This is a very hard corner to get the traction down. And you can see in second gear, traction control is actually doing a really good job, probably better than what you could do through throttle modulation. So not the quickest, but definitely the safest. Now let's see what happens with traction control 2. Now this time it's the same, but to a lesser degree. We did get a better exit speed, but it was kicking in. It was very safe, but it wasn't very fast. And again, coming into turn 2, coming out of this corner, traction control is actually working pretty well to say we're using second gear. So what about traction control 1? Let's see how much it kicks in coming out of turn 1. Can we maintain a decent exit? And you know what? To say it was kicking in, that's pretty good. By no means the fastest, but you did have some of a safety net there where it didn't really get out of control and you maintained some speed. What about traction control 1 in second gear coming out of here? Again, pretty good, probably the best performing out of all. So what is this absolute behemoth like in traction control 0? Well, let's find out. I will say it's a lot more inconsistent. I did not do this first time, but when you get this right, look at the difference. We're probably 2 to 3 tenths faster coming out of turn 1. But for turn 2, I had to do something different. You might notice something that is different here. I used third gear. It was impossible to get the traction down using second, so I had to use third gear there. Okay, an extreme example there with a 1,000 brake horsepower plus hypercar in the Valkyrie with sports tyres, not even racing tyres. But I think it's valuable to test that out because it just exaggerates what traction control does. And we could see with traction control 2 and 3, it was kicking in very heavily, limiting the acceleration out of the corners and holding the car back. But it was obviously a lot safer. When we got to traction control 1, it was still doing it and still slowing the car down to a degree from its potential. But the only time that traction control 0 was faster out of turn 2, the second corner, was if we used a higher gear, that technique of using that higher gear to be able to put the traction control or put the traction down without traction control. So the guidelines in this is, again, it depends on how much of a safety net you want. You will definitely be more consistent with a higher traction control, but as you go down gradually, the potential to go faster, the ceiling is increased. So if you're using advanced techniques of throttle control, using higher gears, knowing exactly where you need to do that, traction control 0 would be faster. In other circumstances where you've got an intermediate level of control, traction control 1, and then beyond that, I would say 2. 3 was too much. And that would be my guidelines for if you're in an extremely overpowered car with sports tyres on. Okay, so we finally come to race cars. And I want to cover these as a whole. Groups 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're in the Mercedes CLK 98, traction control 3, at Spa, and you'll see because this is a high powered car coming out of turn 1, even in second gear, it is kicking in. So again, the safety net of stopping the car from oversteering under power is applied, but coming through Eau Rouge, it's kicking in too much. That's a flat out corner. There's no danger of the rear tyres spinning up. So when it's too high, it cuts in and it stops the car from coming out of the corners faster than it could. Now, I'm guessing you know that the same thing is going to happen here. As we lower the traction control, the higher the precision is required, but the faster you can go in this car. So we've covered that in many examples, but what I do want to talk about is how all of the variables that we've tested today will affect your decision on whether you need traction control. The tyre compound you're going to be using, the amount of downforce the car has, the amount of power it has, the drivetrain, where the weight sits, all affect how a car handles and performs. So when it comes to deciding if you need traction control, the answer is it depends. It depends on how much car control, throttle modulation you personally have. It depends on how difficult it is to drive that car. If it's a rear wheel drive MR car with really grippy tyres, chances are you're not going to need traction control. Same applies if it's four-wheel drive. There's a reason why I haven't used a four-wheel drive car today, because the answer should be obvious. You don't need traction control in those scenarios. But the rule of thumb is the lower the traction control, the faster you can go. It doesn't necessarily mean you will go faster, because you have to have a higher level of skill and precision to be able to accomplish that. And the harder the car is to drive, the more difficult it will be to go faster with a lower traction control setting. And these are all of the things that you have to consider. Don't just think it's a one size fits all. Please consider all of these factors. So that pretty much covers our fully comprehensive test to when you should use traction control. So the next time somebody asks traction control, the answer is it depends. It depends what car you're in, what track you're going around, what tyres you're using, what drivetrain it is. There's all these different factors that you have to consider. So I hope by going through so many different scenarios today, it's helped you to paint a picture of when you should be using traction control in order to go fast and in order to be consistently fast. Now, if you think there's something that I missed out that I should have tested or I tested incorrectly, please let me know in the comments. I'm happy to have constructive criticism, and the next time we do something like this, I will amend that. And of course, if you haven't already liked the video, please give it a hype and consider subscribing for future content. But from the fastest steak in the world, it's over and out. Take care, and thanks for watching.